is when the foot is swinging, tension is taken off of the Achilles tendon, and it's slackened, and the heel's very prominent. But there are many others where the foot is down, where the calf muscles are contracting, and it's clearly the Achilles tendon attaches the distal end, or the proximal end rather, of the heel right at the end of the heel bone, heel tuberosity, and it's very straight at that time because it's taut. Anyway, getting kind of bogged down in the anatomy. So the point is, you look at it and there's some superficial resemblances to an elk imprint, but yet the critical features are gone. There are no hoof prints. The hair's flowing in the wrong direction. You know, when that was raised, Owen Caddy very carefully mapped onto a photograph the direction of the hair flow. And you can't match it up to the flow on an elk. It doesn't work. The hoof prints are missing. And so how did the elk stand up? You know, show me an elk imprint that doesn't have the hoof prints that show where it stood up. And then the interpretation of what we think of the heel prints. What was really telling to me is Rick Knoll went to the Seattle Zoo one day and happened to catch the gorillas at feeding time. And they had put a stack of apples out, and this female gorilla had kind of laid claim to this. And so she was laying down in the exact posture that I had inferred from the image. She was down on one arm, on her butt. She had this foot, and each time she'd reach over to grab another apple, she'd push in with that heel. And then what was she doing? She'd take one bite out of the apple, chew it just a little bit, spit out the peeling. For some reason, she wasn't eating the peeling. And she'd sit the apple that she had now marked as hers over in this pot.
Oh, wow.
And the peelings were accumulating right in her lap. Well, the only place that there were apple peelings in this impression were in precisely the position that we kind of interpreted as where right in front of the buttock, where the thighs were parted, so the peeling falling. You know, so that coincidence really struck me too. John Green wanted to pay me to take his copy of the cast, put it in a van, and drive around and stop at every university across the United States and show it to the anatomists and anthropologists. I said, well, John, you know, here's the problem. To most people, even to some anthropologists, you look at this and it looks like it's something that should be hanging in the waiting room of your dentist's office or something. Modern art piece. It's not, it's uninterpretable to most people. They won't be impressed with it. I said, if you wanted to do this, it'd be much better for me to take a selection of representative casts that illustrate the biomechanics that I've worked out and go and lay this underneath the view, the purview of all these people. So we never did that. And so that's the problem. You know, even if I were 100% convinced that it is what we think it is, it's obscure enough that it's not really going to further the argument, because most people will look at it and say, wow. You know. We even showed it to George Schaller, you know, and he looked at it and he said, well, in all his studies of the mountain gorillas, of course, they didn't pick vegetation, or rarely the situation when they're just laying down in the nettles, where there were body imprints that you could examine. He looked at it and kind of scratched his head and says, you know, I'm really not sure. He said, this is something you should look at. But when he saw the footprint cast laid out, especially that hair foot cast, he was really impressed with that. He said, obviously you have something out there. How are you going to go about it? He wanted me to recruit graduate students to run trap lines, camera trap lines, like the Olympic Project is doing. And I said, well, you know, George, I can't in good conscience encourage the graduate student to take that risk. He said, no, you do it as if it's a wildlife study. You know, you're surveying. He said, this needs to be done. There's still areas in America where this needs to be done. And I said, yes, but merely by association. You know, I have a student now who didn't finish his degree, but got a job with the Fish and Game, his dream job. And he's to the point where he wants to come back to his PhD so he can up his rank and his ranking in the government system. And he said to me very openly, he said, Jeff, do you mind? He said, if I come back, I would like to change advisors, because he received so much grief said, no, I don't mind, as long as you don't mind if I send a memo to the chairman and register that fact with him so that he knows that that's the reason, and that he's aware that we have a new chairman that came from outside, and that he's aware that this has gone on in the past in the department. And so I couldn't in conscience encourage a student to undertake a project, because by associating with me, since I'm not a wildlife biologist, they'd say, well, what is he really doing putting these cameras out throughout the Pacific Northwest? You know, that it would be academic suicide for a student to tackle that kind of project. And, you know, George understood that, and he thought he could still do it. Stress he could do it.
But yeah, it is coming more mainstream though. I mean,
It is.
There's a growing acceptance. So.
Well, there's a more of a growing curiosity, growing tolerance, maybe. Not acceptance, really. I wouldn't go so far. There's a lot of interest, especially in the younger generation. You know, it's just like when the Patterson film was plopped into the lap of the academic community. It broadsided them, and so people made comments like, who was it? It was either Napier or it was Strauss. Strauss was another anthropologist. He said, look at this figure. You've got from the waist up a gorilla, from the waist down a human biped. He said, it's inconceivable that there would be that mosaicism, that chimera of characteristics in nature. Well, 5 years later, Australopithecines were discovered. How were they described? From the waist up, they looked like a chimpanzee. From the waist down, they looked like a little person. Inconceivable. And yet there it is. So, you know, there's been a change, and there's the new generation of students have been raised now, post-Patterson Gilman, and in an era of internet and cable documentaries, a plethora of cable documentaries about Sasquatch. And so it's been on their mind. It's not, it's not such an outlandish proposition, although they're still, until you have tenure, you have to, comes the word, then you start singing with the canary. I had the audacity to jump in the deep end of the pool a couple of years before I had tenure, and as a result, getting tenure was a very bloody, bruising experience, and it was by the skin of my teeth. Not that I wasn't qualified or deserving of it, but because of the stigma attached to it. And even now, my promotion to full professor was delayed by about 8 years because I just said, screw it. I'm not going to go through this. At ISU, our increment of financial compensation for a raise from one rank to the next is abysmal. And there's a few $1,000s, and so I can make that teaching a summer class and not go through this whole drawn-out process again. And I had a department chairman at the time who had overtly stated to my dean that as long as he was the chair, I wouldn't be promoted. And then he got ousted because of financial irregularities in his grant management. And so with him gone, I thought, well, here's my chance. Before we have another unknown variable in the form of a new chairman from outside, let me go for it. And unfortunately, we had a committee in the interim of 4 people serving as co-chairs of the department, running the department, until we had a formal chair search completed. And 2 of them were sympathetic, and 2 of them were extremely antagonistic. And it was a long, common story. But the point was, I only got promoted to full professor with an implicit threat of legal action because of